Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are.
Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our first talk of this year. The topic today is overwatering the plant when you really need to do less. And it's all about relationships and communication and codependency and overcoming it. And really this idea that, sometimes we are trying to manage other people's feelings, reactions, circumstances to a degree that's unhealthy and unrealistic as well. And I was writing about an experience I had recently. So this is like ongoing work for me, to be, fully transparent. I grew up and my wiring is such that the messaging that I got as I was growing is that my job and my role was to take care of the adults in my life. And when you are sort of parentified as a child, it can lead to this kind of this wiring that you got to then become aware of as you get older and go out into the world and start having your own relationships. So I entered adulthood thinking and young adulthood thinking like that was my job, is to make everything okay for everyone else and to try to help. And so I was attracted to people who needed help because I was good at helping. And this is all unconscious stuff, right? Like, it's not like I was aware of the fact that, I find myself drawn to people who are in trouble or who are unhappy or who are having a difficult time managing their lives or their emotions. Like, I know how to do that. And so it was an unconscious pull that led to a lot of unhappiness, because the thing is, and you've heard this before, I have no doubt, you can't save other people. You can be a loving presence and resource, human being in your loved ones' lives. But if someone is in turmoil, inner turmoil, the deep, painful stuff, no one else can do that work, to heal that any more than anybody can do your work to heal. We all have to do our own work in this regard. So other people, somebody can come into your life and be a source of comfort and joy and love and understanding and patience. And, other people can think you're beautiful and incredible. But if you struggle to believe those things yourself, nobody else is going to be able to solve that for you, If you have enough people in your life who are loving and kind and want to be near you, it's going to help. You might start to think to yourself, well, why would all of these really great people want to spend time with me if I were so terrible? It might start to help you kind of question your own core beliefs about yourself, but it's not going to solve it. I'm not someone who thinks that you can't love someone else until you love yourself, but I do think you have to at least like yourself and feel in your heart that you're doing the best that you can. So what happened for me a couple of weeks ago is this tendency that I have to try to manage the feelings of the people I love, to try to create circumstances so that they are not going to feel hurt or upset. And if someone I love is struggling, that's one of the hardest things for me. And that's one of the things that I was writing about this week. As a mom, it's always been easier for me to jump in and save the day than it has been for me to step back and let my kids struggle in any way. And as we all know, sometimes that struggle is exactly what you need in order to learn something about yourself, to grow, to strengthen. and I was writing about the parable of the butterfly and the chrysalis, and the man watching the butterfly struggle to get out of the chrysalis for hours. It's just the butterfly's exhausted. It's like trying. It's just getting like a tiny little bit of itself out of the chrysalis, and so he cuts it open in an attempt to help the butterfly, and the butterfly then has this shriveled up, wrinkly, damp body and wings, and it dies. It did not go through that squeezing out of the chrysalis and the strengthening and the drying off of the wings and all the things it needed in order to be strong enough to fly. So his help killed the butterfly. And I remember when I first read that parable thinking like, oh boy, like I think this might be something I really need to look at. And I also was someone who used to overwater my plants and kill them. And that's a real thing. Like I really did that. And so, and I thought, well, I just don't know what I'm doing because I grew up in New York City and I never really gardened. And so that's why I keep killing my plants. But really it turned out that it was just too much water. And, I now don't kill my plants. I know how to actually have thriving, beautiful plants, which is just an outward symbol of like inward growth on my part, and learning to step back a little bit. But it's a constant, it's like it's something I'm always having to watch for because my default setting is to try to help. And I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of this yourself. I also have. So I know it can be really annoying and even insulting when you go to someone you love because you're struggling and they go into fix-it mode and they start to offer ideas that you've already thought of, So it becomes like, okay, not only is this not helpful now, it's like mildly insulting, and I don't feel like heard or understood, or I'm not getting the sort of like just support and love I wanted. Instead, I'm now like aggravated or, annoyed. And so clearly nobody who loves you, like, people don't want to annoy you, but sometimes it's coming from a loving place, but it's annoying. And so I know this, but that doesn't mean that tendency doesn't still kick in for me. And with my kids, I was writing about how really around the age of 10, your work as a parent hopefully starts to shift a little bit. Like the first 10 years or so. And, I was a latchkey kid. I grew up in the, in the 70s and 80s in New York City, and my parents were divorced, and I would, take the public bus to school and pack my own lunches and walk around the streets of New York on my own. And that didn't always go well. I was mugged, I was grabbed, a lot of things happened. So it's like you do gain a lot of street smarts and resilience and life experience, but probably too much as a young kid because you can't process all of that. So there's like a balance there somewhere where right around that age of 9 or 10 as a parent, you want to step back a little bit and make sure that, your kids are struggling in ways that are going to help them grow and strengthen, but you don't want to be stepped back so much that they're getting hurt or learning lessons that are like too intense to process. You're trying to find the right balance. And so for me, the first 10 years, that jumping in and saving the day thing, it is literally that primal stuff that babies and toddlers and small kids, they don't know better. That's your job, is to teach them how to stay alive. Essentially, you are keeping them alive very much the first few years. You're making sure that they're eating and they have a safe place to sleep and they're secure and they feel loved and their diapers are changed and and then as they're getting older, you're teaching them things like not all strangers are safe and not all dogs are friendly and not, you can't eat off the ground and you don't want to run into the street and don't run downhill. And I was saying, there are sometimes like really weird things that you have to teach your kids that you would never think you would have to teach them, like don't swallow a marble or don't eat a paper towel just to see what's going to happen, which are two things my son did when he was little. the marble he swallowed by accident, but the paper towel he just ate just to kind of see. My daughter painted the bathroom with cherry bark syrup that I had gotten for a cold that she had. I mean, it was just this dark, thick purple liquid all over the bathroom. There's just crazy things that you have to teach your kids that you would think, you might not have to teach them. So that's the work in the beginning. And when they start going to school, there's all this other kind of work that you're doing. You're packing lunches and you're making sure they have the school supplies they need, and you're communicating with the teachers, and you're sending emails, and you're trying to manage if they have anxieties or allergies or an issue with another kid. Like you're on it, you're on it all the time. And then as they start to move into that place where they're prepubescent, right? And you know what's coming because you've been through it yourself. That's where you want to start to make sure that they're developing those tools to manage some anxiety, to learn how to self-soothe, because you're not going to be there every minute of the day anymore. You're not going to be there to sort of like be their nervous system anymore. They're going to head out into the world without you here and there, and hopefully the environments are safe. But that's what starts to happen. And that happens when, let's say you send your kid to preschool or kindergarten, or, they're going to elementary school, middle school, high school. We all know as it goes, right, that as the kids get bigger, the problems get bigger. And you don't want to have a child who has no ability to stay on top of their own stuff, to manage it if something happens, to have some emotional resources there. You want to be setting your kids up so that they can eventually go out into the world and thrive. And if you're constantly saving the day, that is not going to happen. And so with my son, and he was my first, so I kind of had to learn on him a little bit. When he went into fifth grade, he was 10, I decided, we're not going to do this thing anymore that we had been doing for since second grade, really, where I was in a text chat with other moms, and if one kid forgot their homework, one of the moms in the text group would take a picture of the homework and put it in the group, and then you could print it out. And so almost every day for years, there was a homework text. So-and-so forgot their homework. Can somebody take a picture? This was like a common daily occurrence. And that way, none of our kids ever showed up to school without their homework done. If you did show up without your homework done, you would lose recess. And I don't know if you remember being 10, but at 10, if all of your friends are going out to play and you're stuck in the classroom doing your homework, that's a big deal. So I just decided we're not going to do this text homework thing this year. We're not doing that anymore. And I told my son, I went to him before school started and I said, listen, I'm not going to, I'm obviously going to stay on the text thread. That wasn't the only thing we talked about, but we're not going to do the homework thing anymore. If you forget your homework, then you're going to lose recess. And, the reason for that is that I want you to start to really understand there are certain responsibilities that you have. And one of those is to make sure at the end of the day you look at the board and you write down your homework assignment. This is going to help you in your life as you move forward. And he understood and he said, okay, yep, got it. And then, of course, the first time he forgot his homework, he begged me, can you please, it's the first time, it won't happen again. Can you just text the group? And I wouldn't do it. And he was not happy with me. And I had to deal with that feeling of my kid being upset with me, which isn't a good feeling, and I had to learn to tolerate that feeling from a kid that had almost never been, upset with me. It's that thing where you have to recognize I'm not my kid's best friend. That's not my job. I'm their mom or, their parent. And my job is to teach them how to not just survive, but also like really live well in this crazy world. And part of living well is being responsible for your own stuff. So he wasn't happy with me, and that wasn't comfortable for me, but I, held my ground because I knew it was in his best interest. And he went to school, he lost his recess that day, and I don't think he ever forgot his homework again, and so we both got a lesson, right? He got the lesson of like, oh, I need to remember to write this down because my mom's not going to fix it for me if I forget. And I learned the lesson of like, my kid's going to be upset with me sometimes or frustrated or angry, but if it's in his best interest, that's okay. Like, that's my job, is to deal with that. And so it, it's always been easier for me to fix the problem than it is for me to sit back and let my kids struggle. But I've kind of learned along the way that that's really my better option in some situations, not all. And there's always that balance of trying to figure out, okay, is this a situation where I should step in and fix, or is this a situation where I should step back and just let them work it out? Those are never easy, conversations to be having inside your own head, but very important, line to try to walk and to figure out as you go. It's not going to be perfect, and that's okay, but just to be aware of it and to start to figure out how to do that, so that as your children get older and older, and then they're in high school and then they're heading to college, like my kid, you want to know that they've got resources, that they're not so reliant on you that they can't function out in the world. That's not what you want. So, it's sometimes really a painful thing to realize that if you're parenting well, you're essentially preparing your kids to leave you. Like, that's what you're doing, and head out into the big wide world. And hopefully, if you've done a good job, they're going to want to come back and spend time with you. When they're adults, they're going to want to still have you as a very important part of their lives, but you want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and to fly. Like, that's hopefully the job, right? And so that has been something I've been really aware of in my own growth as a mom, but also as a person. And I still have to work on it. And so what happened a couple of weeks ago, just as an example, and I really did give people a window into like one of my least impressive days, certainly as a yoga teacher and someone who's been practicing yoga and meditating daily for 30 years. This was definitely one of my less impressive days. But I kind of wanted to open that window because it is a daily practice. And when you have that wiring that you're, working to overcome, it's not an overnight practice. It's a daily practice of like watching. One of the good things about working on this stuff and having spent 30 years meditating and quieting my mind and recognizing this idea of like, you are not your thoughts, having a little space between whatever your tendencies are and what you do about them, like having that ability to recognize when something has been triggered in you that's kind of like set off your old wiring. Having that awareness is a way to have some power over whether you act on it or not. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to spin for a little while before you figure out what's happening. And so that's what happened for me a couple of weeks ago. And so one of my closest friends in life she came out to LA with her partner, who I had not met before. And my husband only met her once. 4 years ago, because she lives in another state. So we talk, we text, we FaceTime, we sometimes collaborate on things. Like, she's like my sister. We've been through everything together. We met in high school. We went through crushes and passing notes in the hallway and first relationships. And we went to college together and, all night study sessions and all night dancing in club sessions and relationships and dating and matching tattoos and marriages and babies and divorces and post-divorce dating and just like a lifetime of friendship, and love, and some rough patches too, so as any long-term relationship will go through. And so my husband had only met her the one time. She's just coming for the weekend, like 2 nights. And so, of course, we had dinner plans. And the dinner plans were at a time that meant we were going to be driving in rush hour traffic, which is, no one enjoys driving in rush hour traffic, but my husband really doesn't enjoy it. And also going to loud restaurants where it's hard to hear, it's just not like the most fun thing. And so I definitely knew like I was looking forward to the night more than he was. And then that morning he had a Zoom call for a business thing, and it wasn't good. It wasn't like a satisfying call. It was about this project. And so when he got off the call, I knew he was just like, ugh, not in a good way. And so I started spinning inside because I knew, or I thought I knew, that he wouldn't want to like have this dinner, that he would love to just be just staying home and not dealing with the rush hour drive, even though I was going to drive, like that he would just love to be let off the hook, kind of a thing. That's what I imagined was going on. And I started to have all kinds of internal feeling. Now, he didn't say that to me. That's just like what I imagined he was feeling, is like, oh, I don't want to go and deal with this tonight. And so I started spinning in my head about, like that's reasonable. Like he doesn't, I don't like to socialize if I'm like not having the greatest day with people I don't know in a loud restaurant fighting rush. Like, I wouldn't be like excited about that. So that's reasonable for him to feel that way. And, maybe I should just tell him he doesn't have to come if he doesn't want to. But then I went through this whole other thing of like, but I want him to come. And if he, like, I got into this little spin about, I started listing all the things in my head that I do for him that I don't, that aren't like fun. And so I justified my feeling of like, wait a minute, like he should come, like little tantrum in my head. And this is all going on as I'm like going through my day and working and answering emails and doing all the things. There's just these thoughts are spinning around in my head, and I'm feeling justified for feeling upset that he probably doesn't want to come, even though he hasn't said that. I'm just doing a whole like number in my head. And then I finally like get myself to a place where I'm like, you know what? This is like my smaller self making this little list of, reasons I feel justified to be upset if he doesn't want to do this thing. And I'm not going to like feed that smaller self, list making brat. I'm going to like rise above that and just tell him he doesn't have to come. Like, it's fine. And then I started to think about my friend. And I'm like, oh, but if he doesn't come, is she going to take it personally and feel like he doesn't care enough, or think that he didn't really like meeting her the first time around, and so now he's not going to make the effort to like come to this dinner? And I start thinking about, she can be sensitive. I don't want her to like feel that way. And so if he doesn't come, what am I going to say? Am I just going to say that he isn't feeling great, which is true, or am I just going to say like he had a rough, a rough work call this morning, really is not a fan of rush hour and all that stuff? Like, am I going to just be totally transparent, or like, how am I going to handle it? So I start thinking about that and her feelings and her boyfriend and all of that stuff. So now I'm like in the shower, it's time to get ready to leave. And I've just been spinning throughout the day around this topic. And I wish I could remember like exactly what happened, but I suddenly was able to do this thing that you can do in meditation, which is the reason that I love meditation so much. And I was able to just step out of that and watch myself spinning. I was able to step out of the spiral and see myself spiraling. And I started laughing because I realized what I was doing. I suddenly was aware that I had spent a couple of hours internally like creating this circus of how can I make everything okay for everyone? How can I make my husband be okay right now? How can I make my closest girlfriend be okay right now? Like, how can I make everybody okay? And I just suddenly realized like, you can't, and also like, what are you doing right now? The only person whose feelings you can manage are your own. Like, you're the only person that you can, whose feelings you can manage. And so just stop right this minute trying to make everything okay for everyone in the situation, and start focusing on your own feelings. And that's it. And it was like kind of hilarious. Like, I really did start laughing because I was just like, I can't believe what I've been doing. This is so nuts. And it was one of those things of like, I don't know if you've had this thought, I kind of think everyone has this thought sometimes of like, thank God nobody can see what's happening inside my head. Because it was a circus. And as I wrote in the personal essay this week, it was like a self-created kind of neurotic circus, and all the monkeys were mine, and they're just all like yapping away in there. And it was just really good to be able to pull myself out of that and see, and also to be able to laugh at yourself is such a relief, instead of being like, super serious about whatever your tendencies might be, to be able to laugh at yourself a little bit and the absurdity of just being human sometimes. And so it was it felt like a watershed moment there in the shower. It wasn't new information. I have gotten that lesson a million times in my life, that you can't save other people. And I also grew up in an alcoholic household. My mom was an alcoholic, and I know about this. This is not a new topic for me. I know about codependence and what it looks like and what it feels like. I know that I grew up trying to make everything okay for everyone, and thinking if I was just perfect enough, my mom wouldn't drink or come after me, and my dad wouldn't cheat on everyone and sob in my arms. Like, if I could just get it right and make everything okay for everybody, then everyone would be happy and nobody would need to do these really self-destructive things they were doing around me. And at a certain point, my mom and my stepdad had my brother when I was 11, and I dove in and took care of him. He was kind of like my first baby, like I was changing the diapers and doing all the things at 11, 12, 13, 14. And my mom was going out every night, and I was there doing that, thinking, well, if I do a good enough job taking care of him. And I loved him. I was so excited when she had a baby, and I had a sibling. I was over the moon excited. But part of my efforts to take care of him to that degree were certainly wrapped up in trying to get her approval and her love and all of that. So I know about this wire. It's not a news story. I know that that's my wiring. I'm aware of it. And I've spent a lot of time in therapy and on my yoga mat and in my meditation practice, really looking at that and trying to develop the tools to have a system alert when I start doing that, to really alert myself, like, whoop, just, danger, like you're doing that thing. I also, when I went out into the world, all of my relationships were like that. As I was saying, I was drawn toward people who needed help, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, but certainly those. But all of the relationships in my life, I could smell that, if somebody was in trouble, and I just go running in like, I will help, and then you will love me. And it doesn't work. So I learned that the hard way a number of times, and some of them really like in a heartbreaking way of, you cannot save another person. You can't save an addict by loving them enough. You can't save someone who is in like intense turmoil or who rages, or you're not going to solve those deep-rooted issues that some people have of self-loathing and self-doubt, and your love. And when I say your, our, anyone's, it's never going to be enough to fix that for anybody else. Everybody's got to decide at a certain point, I can't keep living like this. Like what I'm doing isn't working, and I have to start to make some kind of a change here if I want my life to feel better. Everyone has to get to that enough moment. So you can come into someone's life and certainly be helpful and be a loving, resource, and help them see themselves in a different light, but only if they're ready to see themselves in a different light, and only if they're at least somewhere inside of themselves thinking, I'm a good person. I might not have gotten everything right in my life, but I know I'm a good person. Like I do, there's some part of me, like I do like myself on some level. I know I'm not like a terrible person. So I had learned, and I have learned so many times in my life that you can't fix those deep rooted issues for other people with your love. But I still have to do that work, and I still have to catch myself, even with the people in my life who do like themselves and do feel good about themselves, that I am in wonderful, healthy, thriving relationships with. I need to do that work sometimes to trust that the people I love can manage their own disappointment, and can manage their own fears or their own heartbreaks or their own anxieties. I have to trust more that they've got it. And I mean that in the context of my own relationships with those people as well. Meaning, if I have a feeling or if I am upset, I need to trust that if I go and I say, hey, this thing that happened between us, it really didn't feel good. Like it felt kind of, it like hurt my feelings, or it felt thoughtless, or I just ended up, not feeling like appreciated or seen or understood or heard. I need to be able to trust that the people in my life can handle that and can say either like, oh, wow, like that's not the way I experienced that at all. This is my perspective. This is where I was coming from. And then maybe I'll look at the situation in a different light, or that the people in my life can say, oh, wow, I didn't show up for you in that moment. Like, I'm really sorry. I get it. Like, I get why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. I need to be able to trust that the people in my life can have those hard conversations and face their own moments of like maybe not showing up with the best that they've got, just the way I can. I can handle it. If I blow it, I can handle it. Or if somebody I love wants something that I wish they didn't want, or I don't understand the choices that they're making, or I wish that they wouldn't like what they like, or, I can tolerate that feeling of discomfort, fear, resistance. I know how to do that, and I need to trust more that the people in my life can grapple with that stuff too, instead of trying to save them from grappling. And I have to watch my tendency to want to save the people I love from discomfort, because sometimes we need the discomfort, just like the butterfly, right? Sometimes we need to struggle with something in order to grow and strengthen and learn something about ourselves or other people or the situation, or learn how to grip less. And when you have been hurt in your life, when you've had some trauma, when you've been, certainly people that have anxious attachment styles, your tendency is going to want to be to fix things and make things nice for everyone, and keep the peace and keep things. And there's a loving component, no doubt. Part of what is driving this feeling in me is that I love these people and I don't want them to be in pain. That's a loving feeling, but you can exercise that feeling to a degree that becomes not so loving, because you're robbing people of the experience they need in order to grow. You're actually not doing them any favors. And B, you're also preventing real intimacy from happening, because you're not then saying how you really feel. And then they're not really knowing you or learning anything about, oh, when this happens, like this person's going to feel this way. You're not extending the trust that you could be and that you need to be if you really want to be close to someone. And so that is work that I continuously have to remind myself, wait a second, am I doing that thing where I'm trying to manage everybody's feelings and make everything nice for everybody? Everything's not going to be nice for everybody all the time, okay? Is everything nice for you all the time? Everything's not nice for me all the time. Things are not going to be easy and wonderful for everyone all the time. If they were, the world would be very different. Human beings would be very different. We need a little bit of friction in order to grow. We need a little bit of obstacle in order to learn about ourselves. We need some heartbreak sometimes, as much as nobody asks for it or wants it particularly. We need it in order to really understand ourselves and to make different choices the next time, to learn. Like if you don't make some bad choices or make some painful choices, let's say. They're not bad. They're just, if you don't at any time in your life make choices that end up causing you heartbreak, you're never going to learn how not to do that. And, sometimes you have a person, it's pretty infrequent, but sometimes you have somebody who had such a happy, great childhood because they happened to be born at a time in their parents' lives when they were very secure. They'd been through their own stuff. They had the emotional resources. They have this kid. They're super excited. The child is received with love. They're supported, but not overly supported. Everything goes exactly right. Again, this is, I'm trying to think of like even one person I know who falls into this category, but let's just say everything went perfectly. That's a person who might not be attracted to relationships that are going to make them doubt themselves, or people who are going to put them through the ringer or be inconsistent or play games. Someone who's like feels good about themselves in a healthy way is not going to be attracted to someone who treats them badly. It does not happen. So you might occasionally find someone, but even in that pretty unlikely scenario where everything's gone really well for someone, it's just part of life. You're going to hit points in your life where situations arise and they're not easy to deal with, and you want to have the resources to get through. And, robbing people of those experiences is not actually helping. It's overwatering the plant. And so I don't know if this is something, if you find yourself in these situations where maybe you're not having conversations, like you're avoiding the hard conversations with some of the people in your life some of the time, it's a good thing to look at, like what's making it hard for me to speak up. I used to really struggle with that in the context of any close relationship I was in. If I was upset, I would clam up because I wouldn't want, when I make a mistake, I'm really hard on myself. And that's also part of my ongoing work, is to know that like I'm not going to get everything right every minute, and to try not to berate myself when I blow it, but instead to just try to look at like, okay, what happened and why didn't I show up with like the best I have to offer in that moment? Like what went wrong? And let me look at that so I can, try not to do that again in the future. There's a difference between that, trying to learn from those experiences where maybe you blew it, versus like beating yourself up for days over a pretty human, experience. We're not all going to get everything right every minute. That's not a realistic expectation. No matter how long you practice yoga or how long you have a daily meditation practice, you're still not going to get everything right every minute. And it's okay. Being able to be loving with yourself, kind at least to yourself, to extend to yourself the same grace and understanding you would extend to anyone close to you. I don't expect everyone in my life to get everything right all the time, at all. Like I'm so understanding of somebody, like we're all gonna, but I need to work on extending that same compassion to myself sometimes. And so because I know what happens for me when I screw up, I would project that and imagine if I tell this person that they let me down, they're going to do to themselves what I do to myself when I let someone down. And the thought of inflicting that pain on someone, of sharing something with someone I cared about that would then create a situation for them where they were tormenting themselves for a few days, I wouldn't want to do that. So instead, I would say to myself, I'll manage it. I'll manage my own hurt feelings. I don't need to share that. I know they didn't mean it. I know it was just a bad moment. I'm going to extend this person the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to do all the work of like forgiveness without even talking to them about it. I'm not even going to give them an opportunity to like own it and be accountable and apologize and think about it themselves and maybe do things different. I'm just not even going to share it. That's what overwatering the plant. You're like robbing someone of an experience that maybe would have helped them learn something about themselves, or learn something about you, or learn something about how to be in the space with you in a way that, feels better. And you've taken that away. I used to do that. I used to really struggle to speak up. And part of it was self-esteem. this is going back in my 20s, like part of it was not putting as high a value on my own feelings and needs as the other person. And part of it was what I'm describing, this desire to help the people I love avoid uncomfortable, painful feelings. And, to just consider if that's something that you struggle with as well. The other thing that I really had to learn is what it feels like to just communicate those things calmly in the moment. That took a lot of work for me, to be able to just speak up in the moment and say, ooh, wait a second, that thing you just said, that I don't know, maybe I misunderstood, or that just didn't feel great. Can we pause? It used to be so hard for me to speak up and to put a value on my own, that what would happen is the feelings would like bubble up and bubble up and bubble up and then explode. And so that's not ideal either, and if you want to be in like healthy, open, thriving relationships, part of it is communicating and trusting that other people can handle it. And you might find there are people who can't handle it, and it's the last thing I want to touch on. You may find that when you share, like, hey, this thing that happened between us, it was really confusing for me, can we talk about it, that person's going to get extremely defensive or angry, or tell you like why you're wrong to feel the way that you do. And if you've ever loved an addict, that's not a person that's going to be accountable and have those meaningful conversations with you. It's not going to happen. When I say if you've ever loved an addict, I mean an addict who is not sober and who has not done any work or like tried to get some help on, someone who's actively addicted to something. You're not going to have a meaningful exchange. And there are also people with personality disorders that make empathy like out of reach. They're just not going to be able to put themselves in your shoes, or they're going to actively avoid putting themselves in your shoes and like dig their heels in and tell you why you're wrong. Those are not your people. You're never going to. There are certain people who are so attached to their narrative of why things are the way they are, that no matter what you say or do, there's not going to be progress, because they are committed to the story that they can live with. And the story that they can live with might be a story where they're the hero and you're the problem. And like, you're not going to change that. And you may have gone through this yourself, but if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're thinking, if I can just write the perfect email, or like if I can just say this in the right way, I'm going to get through to this person and they're going to see the light. Oh my gosh, just like grab your pen and go, because you're not going to write. It's not going to happen. You're not going to write that perfect email. You're not going to say that perfect thing. It's, and I'm talking about those people where you have a long history of trying to communicate and they are continuously awful to you. Like, at a certain point, you're the one, you have to ask yourself, why do I keep trying to have meaningful conversation or communication with someone who is shown me like time and time again over years, they're not open for that. It's like going to the hardware store for apples. Like, you're not in the right place. They're not going to do that with you. And you're not just wasting your time and energy trying, you're also like participating in a dynamic that is, you want to step away, and that's how you change the dynamic, by your response, right? You're not going to change the internal makeup of this person or what they need to do to get through the day and what they need to believe and what they need to think. You're going to change the dynamic by not participating anymore in the narrative. You're just going to like leave them with their narrative and not, there's nothing you can do. Some people want to die on that hill, and there's nothing you can do except let them, and if they decide to step off the hill at some point, that's another story. But a lot of people that do that have a narrative, that have a list of ways they've been wrong, that have an idea of who you are, or who somebody else is, or how things are, they're unlikely to come down off the mountain. So it's sad, but that's just life sometimes. There's just nothing you can do. So I hope this was a helpful conversation. I hope that giving you a window inside my head on my not the most impressive day I've ever had was helpful. And if you are someone who struggles with this, I hope that this conversation of just being able to catch yourself is one of the reasons that I really do recommend a daily meditation practice, even if it's 10 minutes a day, because it'll help you catch yourself when you're spiraling. It'll help you recognize, wait, time out. What am I doing? And usually for me, I'll tell you, it doesn't usually take hours. This was a tough day for me. Usually I will catch myself after 10 minutes. If I'm in a spiral, I'll usually catch myself a lot faster. And on this day, for whatever, I might have been tired. I don't know. I thought about it later. I don't think I slept really well the night before, but that's one of the really great gifts of having a daily meditation practice is the ability to catch yourself, to recognize when you're spinning so that you spend less time spinning and you get more time back in the present. So just dropping that little seed in case that's meaningful to you and you want to figure out how to overcome the tendency. That's the best way I know. Awareness, like anything, when you're trying to break a habit, awareness is step one. Let me just be aware of the fact that this is a thing that I do. And when it's happening, let me be aware that it's happening so that I can then have some power to choose what I do about it. So yeah. And if you want to talk about it more, you have any questions, I'm easy to find. Thank you so much for joining me for this talk. And let's all water our plants a little less this year, maybe, so that they can thrive and grow and strengthen. And so that we have more time to focus on our own work, which certainly keeping your own side of the street clean is plenty of work for any of us. So thank you.